Well, Michigan State University Journalism School alumnus Mark Phelan is the widely respected automotive columnist and critic at the Detroit Free Press, and it's great to have Mark on every so often to talk about all things automotive industry. So, Mark, welcome back to MSU Today.
Thank you, Russ. It's great to talk to you.
So, Mark, I know there are entire conferences held on this, but in general, as we catch up, what's sort of the state of the automotive industry? What are some of both its challenges and opportunities?
It's fascinating because it's a mix of things that you could have seen coming and stuff that nobody ever imagined. The move toward electric vehicles, electrification, reduced carbon emissions seems to really be gathering speed with vehicles that will become mainstream models, and more customers than ever before considered it, thinking maybe I should get an electric vehicle. That's the foreseeable part of it, although it may have accelerated more in the last few months than most people expected. The unforeseeable is the fact that every automaker in the world is saying, where am I going to get the computer chips I need to build the cars that people want to buy? It is an after effect of the pandemic, when automakers thought that sales would be depressed for a really long time. They're happy that sales recovered faster than they expected, but they canceled some of their contracts to buy parts, and the chip makers went out and got other customers. So right now there are parking lots full of cars that have been completed, except for one or two chips that the automaker can't get right now, and they're waiting for them to come in so they can install them. General Motors earlier this year dropped one feature that was quite popular on its best-selling pickups because they couldn't get the chip to enable it. So everybody, for a few months who has been buying that truck has been, going without something that people took for granted last year. But it's as they all seem to be, it's a fascinating year in the auto industry.
Well, Mark, one word we're hearing more and more is mobility. And I don't want to say buzzword, but I think it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. How do the auto companies define mobility? What do they mean?
So sometimes I wonder if they know what they mean by that, because you're right, it has become a catch-all. It is, it's a phrase that a word that resonates well with the investment community and with different groups of consumers, because it can mean whatever they want. Generally, it breaks down into two buckets. One is developing vehicles that can increasingly take over some, most, or eventually all of the work of driving, autonomous vehicles. The other half of it is adding services to vehicles that we never thought of before. Adding, it's a rare car these days that does not come with the capability of connecting to one of the digital assistants, Alexa or Google, whatever they call theirs. I don't even remember. Hey Google. So that kind of thing is part of it. The idea is making it easier for people to do more in their cars, to get better directions, to avoid delays, to make reservations for a hotel, or place a carryout order, all of that kind of stuff. And the reason that automakers talk about it so much, and that the investment community wants to hear about it so much, is that it ties into the capability, they think, to offer subscription services. And that's the latest buzzword, is subscription services. We don't know exactly what they are yet. Automakers want to have, backing up slightly, electric vehicles will need considerably less regular service and maintenance than conventional vehicles do. That reduces one of the revenue streams for automakers and dealers. They're trying to find ways to offset that. And subscription services is one of the things that they think can do that. We don't really fully, I anyway, don't fully understand what they're going to offer that customers will be willing to pay 5, 6, 10, whoever knows how much dollars a month for. But 8, 9, 10 years ago, I could not imagine having 5, 6, however many streaming services that I pay a subscription for. And I, may only use one of them. I have only used, Disney in the year and a half that I've had Disney. I've used Disney to watch Mandalorian, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and WandaVision. that's a lot, and I'm paying that's 3 programs, and I'm paying whatever I'm paying each month for it. But I want those 3 programs badly enough that I'm going to keep paying it. So the subscription model, I think, is waiting for automakers to show us what is the automotive Falcon and the Winter Soldier. What will people want to pay extra for? They haven't demonstrated it yet, but there's a lot of work going on. But all of that kind of wraps up in the idea of mobility, making it easier for people to use their cars, allowing them to do more things while they're in their cars, and making it possible for car companies to sell them things they never thought they wanted before.
I'm catching up with Detroit Free Press automotive columnist and critic Mark Phelan on MSU Today. And Mark, the other word is electrification. And in a moment, I want to ask you one of the few people you didn't drive it, but you got to ride in a moving F-150 Lightning. Before we get to that, though, in general, the auto companies are definitely moving to an electrified future, right? I mean, is there going to be a day, perhaps not in our lifetimes, where there's not a corner gas station? Or, I mean, how far is electrification going to go?
As far as the eye can see, basically. And yes, there will be, maybe in our lifetimes, there will be a day when gas stations are as rare as the places where you buy hay for your horse. There will always be some gas vehicles, that remain. There will be people who collect the classics. There will be events for them. But the big automakers that can afford the investment, and it is massive investment, they have all reached the point of no return and kept going. They are on the route to electric. Most of the large automakers, the General Motors, Ford, Volkswagens, Mercedes of the world, are at the point where they are no longer beginning investment in new gasoline burning engines. And that you don't come back from that, frankly. I mean, they are going to continue. They're going to keep the engines that they've got for a while. They're going to keep building gasoline powered vehicles for quite a while, but all of their capital investment is going into electric vehicles these days. So it will happen. It would take some kind of a catastrophic intervening event for them to decide that they had to turn back now. So we are on the route, but people who worry, I get emails from people saying, I'm thinking about buying a new car, and I'm afraid to get a new Honda Accord because I'm worried that I won't be able to get spare parts for it, or I won't be able to buy gasoline in 5 years. Nobody should worry about that. There will be gasoline. There will be gas stations on every corner for a long, long time. Automakers have to keep building parts for vehicles they've discontinued for a long time, and none of them are discontinuing these vehicles because electric vehicles may be the way of the future, but you need to fund the future with money that you make today. And they make that money selling their current vehicles. There are going to be huge numbers of gasoline and diesel powered cars and trucks built for at least, I think, through the rest of this decade.
And Mark, tell us about this Ford F-150 Lightning, because I read someone said somewhere, Tesla made it cool to have an electric car. Ford, when it's the largest selling vehicle for 40 years in the world, may bring it to the masses. Just talk about this truck and what Ford says you can power your house if the power goes out and charge tools at the website. I got to believe it's going to be very popular.
I think so. And that example you give of powering your house is the kind of thing that I was talking about with the new applications that people haven't thought of yet, because there are very few people who are dissatisfied with their current vehicles. They start every day, they get them where they need to go. They're not saying, I'm desperate to trade this for a new technology. Even the people who are most committed to reversing climate change understand that the vehicles need to be practical. They need to be accessible to the vast majority of people. Ford, I mean, it's corny to say it, but they did this with the Model T 110 years ago. They built, cars were a luxury good until then. They built a car that the people who made that car could afford to buy, and changed the world. And the F-150 is the kind of vehicle that can be that sort of inflection point for electric vehicles too, because the prices start just under $40,000, which is serious money, absolutely, but it is well within the range of what people pay for, current F-150s. So it's a vehicle that's attainable. The technology is still improving, and it will for a while. So there are still drawbacks in terms of how far can you go and how long does it take to recharge the battery. But they are offering new features like the ability to power your house for 3 days in a blackout. And something that will be part of an app that they are basically, you charge it off the grid. You've got a 240 volt charger that you have installed at your house, and you charge it overnight, and that gives you enough power to to drive 300 miles or power a work site if you're a contractor, or your house literally for days. I mean, they've even got a function built in where if you are powering a work site, you plug 10, 11 different power tools, lights, air compressors, you name it, into various outlets from this truck. You can work all day. They say for up to 3 days, but you can work all day, and you can program it in a little note that says, when I'm done, I need to drive 80 miles to get home. And it will stop powering those before you get to that critical level. So the amount of thought that has gone into this to make it not just practical, but to offer new features that people never realized they wanted before is what would open the door. More people are now willing to consider electric vehicles. They need to be convinced that the electric vehicle gives them something more. And things like that. Plus, I suspect that people will very quickly realize that they love not having to stop for gas, every Tuesday afternoon or whatever, not being stuck out in the heat or the snow or the rain, just plugging it in every night, and it's got a full charge when you start the next day. So the F-150, even though the F-150 Lightning is the name they use for the electric version, it won't be on sale until next spring. But it's hard to overstate the significance it may have at that point. And it comes at the same time that Volkswagen is finally beginning to get a lot of vehicles on the road from its big shift into electric vehicles. GM is about to get their first. GM, unlike Ford, decided to make their first vehicle a luxury vehicle. And there's arguments for that too. And part of what makes me optimistic about the market is that companies are approaching it from all these different ways. But GM is also going to have an electric version of their Silverado pickup that will go on sale probably around the same time as the F-150 Lightning. So between that and newcomers like Rivian, which is financed essentially by Amazon, so there's no way that's not going to come to fruition, and Tesla with their Cybertruck, which appeals to a totally different group of people. Nobody's going to buy a Cybertruck because they're a contractor, because the bed of it is like what you would see in an old El Camino. It's not a practical vehicle. It's a style statement, but it's another thing that increases the mass of the momentum of the shift that's going on. So it feels like all of that is at a critical point. And we need infrastructure to catch up. We need more charging. We need more recharging station. We need more generation, and we need more charging stations. Both of those are things that are being addressed by the proposed infrastructure bills. So there's a possibility of the pieces coming together and the change accelerating rapidly from here.
Well, Mark, the phrase game changer is often overused, but I think with the F-150, and as I'm pretty sure the Silverado is the second leading vehicle in the world. So any significant adoption of those maybe starting next spring really could be significant. I think you make some good points. And I'm talking with Mark Phelan from the Detroit Free Press, covers our beloved automotive industry. And Mark, you mentioned autonomous vehicles. There are connected vehicles. Explain that while they're related, they aren't the same thing. And where are we kind of on cybersecurity concerns with connected vehicles? I don't heard as much about that lately, but.
And let me start with cybersecurity, because that's a fascinating area, and it's one that is rightly very much in the news these days. The pipeline hack is the perfect example of why it's so important. And I was at an automotive cybersecurity conference a few years ago, and people were talking about all of the things that they were doing to prevent these huge, sophisticated actors from being able to hack into their car. And I asked one of them, in a side conversation, why would any of these big, multinational organizations, terrorists, criminal governments, whatever it may be, want to hack my car? The worst they can do is have me run into a wall. And is that really worth their effort? And the person looked at me and they said, no. Your car is the gateway to the infrastructure. And that's where cybersecurity becomes really important for the whole country, because connected and autonomous vehicles are going to be, have direct links to infrastructure. The more autonomous vehicles we get and the more driver assistance we get, the more we will have vehicles that can communicate with stoplights, with railroad crossings, with other vehicles on the road to figure out, where's traffic, should I reroute, all of those things. Similarly, as you're more connected, you may, pay for a charge or for a carryout order just by tapping purchase now on the touch screen in your car. That gets your car connected to the financial infrastructure. So your car is the potential gateway to disrupting basically all aspects of life in America. And that's why connected cars need to have absolutely first-rate cyberstructure. That's why cybersecurity. That's why it's such an emphasis. That's why you see some very high-powered people from defense and intelligence being hired by automakers now. And interestingly, it's one of the reasons that the tech community in Israel has become a huge player in the auto industry, because so many people come from the Israeli military and particularly Air Force, where they have a very advanced, cyber operations, to the auto industry, because they've been at the sharp end of the spear in terms of, penetrating and preventing penetration of systems. So the connected part is vital. Autonomous is coming. We've got a couple more cars, a couple more vehicles this fall that should be available with hands-free driving on the highway. Right now, the only vehicles that can do that are ones from General Motors that have a system called Super Cruise. Some people with Tesla think their cars have got hands-free driving. Do not believe that. If you have one, do not do it, please. Tesla's got a very interesting system, but it is absolutely reckless and incredibly dangerous to yourself or anybody else to think that you can, close your eyes, get in the back seat, take a nap, any of that stuff. You still have to be hands on the wheel. The General Motors system and the new ones coming from Ford, GM is Super Cruise, Ford's is I think called Blue Cruise. Those allow you to take your hands off the wheel on highway drives. It's incredibly relaxing and enjoyable. I've done it, but you always have to be ready to resume control. And the cars have got alerts built in to let you know if there's anything going on in terms of construction, traffic. They've got tons of sensors. In my experience, the alerts are very effective. They give you plenty of time to resume control, but you have to be ready to do it. Those technologies should become much more prevalent soon, and they should, even though they're not full autonomy, they should make driving more efficient and pleasant for people, because part of it is that they just stop some of the slowdowns that you see when people on your commute home, when you come to a curve on the highway and the whole lane of traffic slows down because one person took their foot off the gas or braked when they didn't need to. That doesn't have to happen if the vehicles all have this hands-free driving system. They all know what's coming. The first car doesn't slow down, so then all the other ones behind it don't. So just little things like that can make a big difference in the amount of time you spend on the road and how pleasant it is. So we'll see all of that. Full autonomy in limited areas is feasible now for deliveries and things like that. And I think it's reasonable to expect that we'll see that service for deliveries and for perhaps shuttles in limited in geofenced areas in the near future. That's going to make a big difference to people. It's one of the things that can be a big ongoing stream of revenue to automakers too. So when you get into connected services and subscriptions, that's part of what they're talking about as well. The engineers tend to be very cautious about complete autonomy because in their minds, that means that you can basically be in an elevator. You don't see where you're going ever. You have no control other than pushing the button that says, this is my destination. And no matter whether it's day, night, snow, flood, the system will get you there. That level where the system can compensate with any outside factor is very distant. It'll be a couple of decades at least before we get to that, if we ever do. But before then, we will probably be at the point where hands-free evolves into systems that will drive for you 95% of the time, but there still has to be a steering wheel available and windows so that if there is a flood, if there is a tornado that knocks out the infrastructure that talks to the car about upcoming obstacles, that you can take over. That is feasible, and for most people, that will be the equivalent of autonomy. And it's part of the reason that engineers are really hesitant to say it, because they think of the absolute ideal idea of no windows, no steering wheel, you never have to do anything as autonomy. But there are other steps on the way that are coming relatively quickly that people will benefit from.
That's Detroit Free Press automotive columnist and critic Mark Phelan sharing his expertise on all things automotive with me on MSU Today. And Mark, let me ask you about your craft journalism. I mentioned you're a grad of MSU's J School, which I'll ask you about in a minute, but coming out of maybe wasn't the most favorable previous federal administration. I don't think I'm saying anything out of school there, but what's sort of the state of journalism, and are we still using the word monetize a lot? I'm a happy digital subscriber to both the Free Press and News, but what's the state of your craft?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for subscribing, and thanks to everyone who listens, who does. We appreciate it, and we take the trust people put in us very seriously. I suppose you're right. We have gone from we were in the frying pan and now we're just back in the fire, or vice versa. At least we are not being called the enemy of the people on a daily basis. So there's that. But there are still tremendous challenges economically. I think newspapers are increasingly getting a handle on it because they have learned how to monetize more services. The Free Press now has premium content that requires a subscription for access on some stories, and we've been very successful in getting people to sign up for that access. But we also, when there's a story that's an emergency, as with most of our COVID coverage, we make that, and most other newspapers also make that available to everyone for free because we feel an obligation to do that. So, I mean, it's incredibly competitive. We still live in a world where there are far too many voices that are making claims that they can't support, and just making wild charges in general. And I think we can all probably think of 5 examples, from the last week's news of that kind of thing. But we are continuing to do everything that we can to provide the information that people need, and to make sure that we get it right. Because I don't think there's anyone at any of the established outlets that doesn't feel a real responsibility to people who trust us to provide information.
Yes. So Mark, take me back when you were coming out of high school. Why was MSU the place for you to pursue journalism? And second part, sort of, how did your time as a Spartan impact you to get you where you are? And where you're going.
What a great question! Thank you for asking that. It's funny. I knew that I wanted to write, and I knew that writing was hard work, and that I am lazy, and that I wouldn't do enough of it to discover if I was any good at it if I didn't have to do it. And journalism was the field that I could see where if you don't do it, the consequences are immediate. So that was really the beginning of it. I became a fan of newspapers, probably as a teenager, reading columns in, amazingly enough, the Detroit Free Press, and seeing some of the syndicated columnists, that are legendary names in journalism now. Mike Royko from Chicago, Herb Cain from San Francisco, and realizing that it would be wonderful to be able to talk to people in that way, and to give them information that one hopes that they would find valuable and entertaining. So that was really kind of my evolution. It's funny, I was talking to an old friend from MSU recently, and she said that she remembered something I had completely forgotten. At some point, while we were all in school here, I said that someday I was going to be a columnist for the Detroit Free Press, and I thought, how lucky do you get? Yes, I am that. Thank you. So the J School was absolutely invaluable. One of the things that has amazed me, I chose MSU, one, because the J School is outstanding. It's had a good reputation forever. It teaches the things you need to actually do the job, as well as the big overarching principles of, freedom of the press, voices, giving voice, to those who don't have it, accountability, all of those things. But it gets granular. I mean, the Weeder class for the J School, and I suspect that it still is, was one where you just sat at, back then, manual typewriters and typed on paper a story based on a list of facts. And if you had a typo in a person's name, it was a 0 point, because you don't get to get people's names wrong. That is sort of rule one. You have to get the basic facts right, and from that point onward, it really it focused on the things that you need to do, that you need to understand, to get the information and present it to people in a way that is useful and one hopes entertaining to them. And I had the great good fortune at MSU to work at the State News, the newspaper there, which is distributed. It was then distributed to everybody on campus. Now they've gone to a largely online presence, but I assume that there are still places where you can pick up the hard copy. But it was the best possible training, and run by students, paid for by students, and focused on covering the meetings that influenced our classes, the meetings in East Lansing that influenced the places where a lot of us lived, the sports that we cheered for, the security of life on campus, the places where you could get a good deal, how to avoid scams when you were signing up for your first apartment, all of that stuff. So it was incredibly valuable. And there are people, that I worked with whom I worked at the State News, who are, colleagues of mine at the Detroit Free Press today. And I think that's just incredible. And it is a testament to, the success of, the J School at MSU and of the State News. I've been incredibly lucky, and I can't overstate how much of that is due to the things that happened to me, and that I was lucky enough to learn while I was at State.
Spartans will, that's right. Well, so Mark, with MSU having every intention of returning to normal in the fall within, person classes and whatnot, what would your advice be to the young Mark Phelans maybe sitting in a class in the ComArts building now, who may want to in some way follow you into this crazy, ever-changing communications world?
First of all, good luck, because that's important. Find places where you can do the work now, because showing that you have done it is the best way to get hired afterward. I mean, the state news was great. The Capital News Service, which Michigan State initiated, is a phenomenal service that also gives people that chance. I mean, whatever you can do to find the opportunity to get into print and to work with with editors who will tell you what they need, and learning to understand that relationship is important. And also, the more different things you can do, the better. I mean, I would never, when I went to J school, you could get a degree that was as good as any place in the country without ever having recorded your voice on anything, without ever having taken a picture, and certainly without video, because the cost of video equipment then was prohibitive. Now you need to be comfortable with all of the different aspects of multimedia. You may spend most of your time writing text, but you could equally spend all of your time shooting video and narrating voiceovers. And you're accomplishing the same thing. You're getting people information that they want or need, and helping them with it. So the more different things parts of the skill you can master, figure out how to do video, get comfortable with audio, learn what are the differences in presenting information in those, and of course, still photos also. No story makes it on the Detroit Free Press website if there is not a photograph associated with it, and that's maybe the best lesson of all, because it used to be that there was a bifurcation between people who wrote and people who took pictures, and there are people who will specialize in both. The people who have got a great eye for photography and video create things that I could never imagine in a million years, but you have to at least be competent in all of those things.
Those iPhones take such good photos now, Mark. It's amazing.
It's stunning, and the video you can shoot with them. I mean, it really is amazing. And I would never in a million years have thought that I would come to enjoy and really benefit from producing videos. I'll give you one fast example. It used to, whenever I would be reviewing a vehicle, and there would be something that didn't fit right. It hung. It wasn't lined up. The gap was too big. Whatever the problem was, I would write about it, and the car company would say, no, we didn't do that. That's not right at all. And the car that I had written about was already back and may have had that thing fixed by that time. The first video that I ever did to complement a review had some of those problems, and I took pictures of them, and I shot the video, and I illustrated the fact that one of the gaps was so big that literally I stacked 5 quarters together and I slipped it between 2 pieces of trim, and I ran that video and I never heard a peep of a complaint. So I mean, it helps you to document what you are saying, and to give people more evidence. So it really does it improves the job that we do, getting the facts to people.
Well, Mark, as always, it's been great talking with you. I forgot one question before I get your final thoughts. Where are we with the auto show? It was going to make a big splash in June of 2020 and be outside. And where are we? Is there ever going to be another one as more and more internet things happen for cars? What's the state of the once beloved auto show?
The auto show has become a moving target for sure. At one point, they had planned on having it in October this year in downtown Detroit. The planning for these things, it goes on months in advance. Automakers have got budgets that are set relatively early in the year, and to have a big presence introducing a new vehicle at an auto show is an outlay of $1 million or more just for the staging of the big spectacular reveal. So earlier in the spring, the auto show got to the point where they were at the drop dead date whether they could tell automakers, yes, we will definitely have a big show, set aside millions of dollars from your budget. They were not sure if they'd be able to have a big show or not at that point, so they pulled the plug on it. So this year there will not be a Detroit auto show. There are a couple of little things that will try to fill the gap, and I'll describe those to you in a second. But The plan right now is that there will be a 2022 auto show. It will be in downtown Detroit in early to mid-June, as I recall, and it will do all of the things that they had originally planned when they made the move from winter to summer. They will have outdoor events for driving. They'll have an off-road campus built. They'll be able to demonstrate self-driving vehicles and other technologies. And they'll have just, nice outdoor displays and food trucks and all of the things that you can do, on the waterfront in Detroit in Michigan in June that you would not want to try to do in January. So that plan is still in place. For the fall, the Detroit Auto Show auto dealers plan right now is in August, so still summer for that. They will have a downtown car crawl, the Motor City car crawl. Every brand will be represented. There will be stands around downtown Detroit, showing all of their vehicles. They're expecting to have, again, food trucks, music, try to make it a kind of a festival downtown. That's the, I believe, the first weekend in August. But if you look up Motor City car crawl, you can figure that out. In late September or mid or late September, there's going to be an event at a small private car club just north of Detroit, on the southern border of Pontiac. That's the place is called M1 Concourse, and the event will be called Motor Bella. They plan Italian for beautiful cars, basically. They plan to have stands. It's a big facility. There's a racetrack, lots of open ground. They plan to have displays from automakers. They hope to have a couple of new vehicles introduced, the kind of news that used to drive a lot of traffic to the Detroit Auto Show. That will be going on in September. It's at a smaller place. It's not at a place that can accommodate hundreds of thousands of people as TCF Center could for the auto show. So it'll be a much smaller event, but it will be available for people who want to go out. If you Googled Motor Bella, you could get the details. And as the dates get closer, we'll have a better idea of what's going on. Certainly there'll be coverage in the free press if any new vehicles are introduced. And if you're shopping for a car, it's probably a good way to spend an afternoon. And again, September, in Michigan, it doesn't get much nicer, than the weather will probably have. So, with any luck, it'll be successful. And those two events are placeholders for next year's auto show. The one other thing I should say is that a couple of the other traditional auto shows have been a bit more aggressive. The Chicago auto dealers hope to have a show that is largely largely outdoors in downtown Detroit, Chicago, in I believe July, and the New York Auto Show is going to try to do another thing outdoors in the fall. So we may see, we will definitely see whether the Detroit dealers were overly cautious when they decided not to have their bigger event in the fall, but there's motion going on. The environment is changing as to how much money and effort automakers want to put into auto shows. We won't have a real answer to that until we go through a full normal calendar year, but things are beginning to happen again.
Well, Mark, really appreciate you sharing all your insights today. And I guess just before I let you go, trends you're watching, what's kind of cool in the industry, what excites you, what are you going to be kind of looking at, good or bad, over the next several months?
Oh, well, I really want to see what are the practical limits of two of the technologies we've been talking about: electric vehicles and hands-free driving. And I'm hoping this fall to be able to take a road trip in which I might take one of the new electrified Fords, probably the Mustang Mach-E, on a drive where I would try both of those, because the people who are most uncertain about electric vehicles are the ones who are afraid that the longer charging time will be inconvenient for things they like to do. So I want to see what is the sort of best case for going 1,100 miles in an electric vehicle? How much longer does it take if I'm driving with the latest technology as far as finding charging stations and that kind of thing? And if I can combine that with a vehicle that does most of the driving for me when I'm on the highway, that would be ideal. So that's kind of my the thing I'm most interested in attempting this year. Otherwise, I'm just really looking forward to seeing how various companies answer all of the questions that are facing them these days. Because when the most interesting thing in the world to me is when you see two smart people come up with different answers to the same question. And maybe they both work. Maybe one of them's right, one of them's wrong. And it's even better when they're spending their money and not yours to come up with these answers. So I'm going to be really interested, because we've got enough different approaches to electric vehicles coming now that we'll be able to see what works, what doesn't, what are the great new ideas we haven't thought of. And then we'll see people start to converge around a consensus on what these vehicles should do. So, that's what I'm most eager about. In addition to, hoping that we do get the action to improve generating capacity and the charging that's really necessary for this technology to take off.
Well, Mark, again, thank you so much for joining me and updating me on all things automotive industry on MSU Today.
Thank you so much, Russ. It's always a pleasure.
That's Mark Phelan, Michigan State University School of Journalism alumnus and widely respected automotive columnist and critic at the Detroit Free Press. Obviously, just Google the Detroit Free Press or go to freep.com. Mark's on Twitter at Mark_Phelan. That's Phelan. And I'm Russ White. This is MSU Today.